The cake box tumbled from my hands, vanilla frosting smeared against cardboard as my father's words hung in the air between us. "You're too old to freeload. It's time you left." I stared at the mess on the floor, my name in red icing, the candle snapped in two. My mother, Vanessa, kept her eyes fixed on her plate. My father, Richard, took another swig of whiskey, lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. 30 years old today. My gift, a packed suitcase waiting upstairs and a silent eviction. My name is Eliza, I'm 30, and I've been my family's invisible backbone for 7 years. This is how I stopped holding up people who never saw me standing. I mentally cataloged everything I'd given them: mortgage payments when Dad lost his job, medical bills when Mom's back went out, the new roof last spring, years of paychecks into their hands, years of being told I wasn't doing enough while doing everything. "I pay the internet bill," I said, "the electricity, half the mortgage, the groceries." Richard laughed, a sharp bark. "Paying bills doesn't buy you a lifetime stay, Princess." Princess, the nickname he used when I was little, now weaponized with contempt. This wasn't spontaneous. The suitcase upstairs, the coldness in the air, the way Mom wouldn't meet my eyes, they'd planned this. My birthday wasn't a celebration, it was a deadline. I pushed my plate away. Standing slowly, I let their eyes follow me. Instead of tears, I nodded once, sharp, final. "Got it," I said. Richard smirked. Vanessa kept her head down, shame in her shoulders, but not enough to speak. As I climbed the stairs, each step creaked. My bedroom door closed behind me with a hollow thud. This house was never mine. The packed bags confirmed what part of me had known for weeks. I wasn't shocked. I was done. My hands moved with precision, gathering essentials while my mind worked through logistics, cancel autopay, transfer funds, find housing. When the last account was severed, I closed my laptop. The silence felt different now, lighter, sharper. This wasn't about revenge, it was about balance. They wanted me gone? Fine. But they would feel what it meant to lose the daughter who had held their world together. Downstairs, the TV kept blaring. I wondered how long before the lights flickered out, before reality crept into their bubble. I wasn't sticking around to find out. Tomorrow I would be gone, but tonight, I started pulling the first bricks from the foundation they had built on my back. My fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard. First the electricity bill. I had been the primary account holder since Dad forgot to pay one winter. Within seconds, I navigated to the payment section. "Remove payment method," flashed across the screen. I clicked submit without hesitation. Next was the water bill. Same story. I canceled the auto pay with grim satisfaction. I wasn't just leaving, I was extracting myself from every vein that kept this household alive. Netflix was next. I almost laughed seeing the profile names: Dad's, Mom's, even family movie night. A joke considering we hadn't had one in years. Delete account, internet service gone, cell phone plan gone, Amazon Prime disconnected. Each click wasn't vengeance, it was survival. It was truth. After an hour, I wrote down everything I had disconnected. I needed to see it in ink, the final tally of everything they had taken for granted. As I scribbled, memories washed over me. Late nights at the office, vacations canceled, birthdays skipped because they always needed something more important. This wasn't about punishing them. It was about refusing to be their safety net. I found the emergency savings account I had set up years ago. The account had my name listed first, but I'd made it accessible to them too because, well, family. I tapped the option to freeze the account. No withdrawals, no transfers. As the confirmation screen blinked, the knot in my chest began to loosen. I had given them everything: money, time, loyalty. Tonight, I chose myself. At 2 a.m., I closed the laptop. My bag was ready, my car packed with essentials. Tomorrow, I would leave this town behind. Tomorrow, they'd wake up to a life without me. Morning came with blinding clarity. I slipped out before dawn, leaving my key on the counter beside a note. Bills are canceled. By noon, my phone exploded with notifications. 12 missed calls, Richard, Vanessa, neighbors, family. I sat on my friend Mira's couch, coffee warming my hands. I'd called her last week when I first saw the packed suitcase, and she'd immediately offered her spare room until I could find my own place. A text from my cousin Tyler, period. Internet's down, no lights. Dad's furious, Mom crying. Tyler and I had always been close. The only family member I'd kept in my contacts, he had never bought into Richard and Vanessa's manipulation. It had begun, and I wasn't there to fix it. A voicemail from Vanessa. Honey, there must be some mistake. You wouldn't just leave us like this. Please call me, we're family. Funny how quickly Freeloader turned into family when the Wi-Fi stopped working. A text from Richard. You'll regret turning your back on family. No warmth there, just rage. I silenced the phone. Mira joined me with coffee. You look like someone told you your winning lottery ticket expired. I laughed without humor. They're panicking. Good, she said. Sometimes it's not betrayal to save yourself. It's survival. Later, we headed to a community event, an autumn festival with pies and pumpkins about 20 minutes from my parents' neighborhood, but still within our small county. I stayed near the edges, but it didn't take long for whispers to reach my ears. Richard was there, voice raised just enough to gather attention. My daughter abandoned us, he barked, after everything we sacrificed for her. Some nodded sympathetically, but others exchanged skeptical glances. Mira nudged me gently. Don't. I hadn't realized I had started walking toward him. I stopped, forced myself to breathe, let him play the victim. Instead, I wandered past the booths, letting snippets of conversations drift by. Didn't her daughter pay for their bills for years? Isn't that the one who stayed home when the mom got sick? The tide was turning slowly. Richard and Vanessa could spin their stories, but cracks were starting to show. 3 days passed in a blur. I buried myself in tasks, organizing documents, cleaning, job hunting, anything to stay busy, but the mind is stubborn. My phone buzzed again. Vanessa, point. After everything we did for you, this is how you repay us? Dad's health is failing. He hasn't eaten in 2 days. The guilt came fast and sharp. I sank onto the couch, reading the words again and again. Images flashed, birthday parties, late-night talks, Thanksgiving turkeys, childhood memories that didn't match recent years. What if they really were suffering? The guilt slithered deeper. Relatives I barely spoke to suddenly felt entitled to an opinion. Your father's heart isn't strong, Aunt Marcy's voicemail croaked. Think about your mother, Uncle Phil texted. She's fragile. This could kill her. Each message hammered another crack into my resolve. Maybe I was heartless. My phone buzzed again. Tyler, period. Dad told Mom to fake chest pains next if guilt-tripping you doesn't work. I stared at the screen. So that was the plan. Not mending, not understanding. Just another con. They didn't miss me. They missed what I could do for them. Numb, I tossed the phone onto the coffee table. The sun shifted across the floor, tracing slow, golden fingers across Mira's rug as the hours slipped by. I let the weight of everything press down, not resisting it this time. The years of bending over backward, the quiet sacrifices, the endless giving, hoping it would be enough to earn a seat at a table that was never truly mine. When Mira came home from her shift at the clinic, she asked, "You okay?" I nodded once, slowly, because I finally was. After she disappeared into the kitchen, I reached for my phone. I scrolled through my contacts one by one. Richard, Vanessa, Aunt Marcy, Uncle Phil, every cousin who had called to scold but never once called to ask how I was holding up. One by one, I hit delete. I didn't rush, I didn't cry. I simply erased. When I was done, I blocked every number tied to that house, that life, that false sense of belonging, except for Tyler's. It wasn't an act of anger. It was an act of mercy for myself. I placed the phone face down and sat back, breathing deeply for what felt like the first time in years. Tomorrow would come with new battles. I wasn't naive enough to think cutting them off would end the war, but tonight, I had won a small victory. The first few days slipped by uneventfully. I filled my time helping Mira reorganize her apartment, applying for positions in nearby towns, even cooking dinner for us, small acts of reclaiming normalcy. Then it started. It was a Thursday morning. I was sipping coffee when my phone buzzed across the table. It was a message from Carrie, an old coworker who had my personal email address that I still used for job applications. Dot. Hey, you seen what your dad posted? I tapped the link. There it was, splattered across the local town's Facebook group. Richard's words burned into my screen. Some daughters are raised to be grateful. Some turn into snakes. After everything we sacrificed, our daughter left us sick, starving, abandoned. Pray for us. The post already had over 100 comments. Some offered prayers, others hurled judgment like stones. Ungrateful brat, one read. Parents give you life and you spit on them, another sneered. Mira glanced over. Bad? I could only nod, pressing the phone screen to my chest. By noon, the wildfire had spread. Screenshots flooded my inbox from friends who still cared enough to send warnings, neighbors, distant cousins, even former teachers commenting on how they'd always suspected something was wrong with that girl. Mira sat down across from me. They're writing your story for you. Are you really going to let them? I stared at her, the words sinking in. Number not this time. I powered off my phone and turned to the drawer where I'd been keeping the folder, my insurance, my truth. Inside was a carefully kept record, years of receipts, screenshots, emails, bank statements, proof of the thousands of dollars I'd funneled into that house without ever once demanding gratitude. Electric bills in my name, mortgage payments from my account, repairs funded by my overtime shifts. They had forgotten the cost because they had never paid it, but I hadn't. I spent the next few hours scanning documents, organizing files. Every receipt was a memory, and every memory was a blade cutting away whatever pity I might have felt. Mira peeked into the room. You going to post it? I looked up from the laptop. Not yet. Let them talk a little more. Let them show everyone who they really are. Because I knew something Richard and Vanessa hadn't counted on, I wasn't rushing into battle with blind anger. I was patient now, strategic. The small town we lived in thrived on gossip, but it also crumbled fast when truth surfaced. All I had to do was wait for the right crack in their facade. And when that moment came, I wouldn't have to say much, just the truth. I sat at the small dining table in Mira's apartment, laptop open, heart hammering, but hands steady. Carefully, I uploaded the thread. It wasn't angry, it wasn't emotional, it was clinical. First, screenshots of my years of utility payments, power, water, internet, each bearing my name, each dated clearly. Then came the bank statements showing mortgage payments pulled monthly from my account. I included old emails between me and contractors, messages verifying I had funded repairs that had kept the house standing through harsh winters. Finally, I laid out a brief timeline, the years I sacrificed vacations, birthday celebrations, even simple self-care to keep a roof over their heads. And then the ending, a simple statement. When they asked me to leave, they didn't just lose a daughter. They lost the person who kept the lights on when they weren't looking. I hit post. For a moment, there was silence. Then the phone began to buzz. It started slow, a few likes, some comments of shock, a few private messages from old school friends saying, I always wondered why you stayed so long. Then the momentum shifted, like a dam breaking. Dozens of shares, hundreds of comments. Neighbors, former teachers, even people I barely remembered started chiming in. One neighbor posted, period. I remember seeing her shoveling their driveway alone when she was 16 while her parents yelled from the porch. Another, dot. Richard always bragged about how he never paid a cent for household bills once Eliza got her job. Stories poured out like hidden wounds finally surfacing. It turned out people had seen more than they ever let on. They just hadn't spoken until someone dared to name the truth out loud. Meanwhile, Richard and Vanessa panicked. First, Richard tried to counterattack. He posted a brittle, furious status. We all have misunderstandings in families. My daughter exaggerates things for sympathy. Sad, really. It backfired instantly. Underneath, commenters weren't buying it anymore. Funny how you never posted about her paying your bills until now, someone snarked. Then Vanessa tried a different tactic. Pity. Using my work email that I hadn't yet changed, she sent message after message. Eliza, please, your father isn't well. I didn't know he was going to post that. This is all a huge misunderstanding. Please take it down before people think badly of us. There was a time when that pleading tone would have shattered me. Not anymore. I knew now it wasn't about regret. It was about reputation. That afternoon, Mira and I walked down to the fall festival at the town square, a different event than the previous one, but still within our county. I felt eyes on me the second I arrived. It wasn't hostility anymore, it was something softer, sadder, a kind of collective realization. Finally, as Mira and I neared the pumpkin carving station, a woman I barely knew, one of Vanessa's old church friends, stepped forward. Her hand was gentle as she touched my shoulder. "You deserved better, sweetheart," she said quietly. "We all knew. We were just too afraid to say it." Tears stung the back of my eyes, but I blinked them away. Standing there in the heart of the community where I had once been invisible, I realized something with a clarity so sharp it almost hurt. The shame was never mine. It had been theirs all along. 2 days had passed since I posted the truth. Then came the knock. I opened the door to find a uniformed officer standing there, holding a large manila envelope. "Miss Eliza Martin?" he asked. "Yes," I answered, a knot forming in my stomach. He handed over the envelope. "You've been served. Civil suit." I thanked him mechanically and stared down at the envelope. I didn't have to open it to know who it was from. Sitting down at the kitchen table, I unfolded the papers inside. Richard had filed a lawsuit against me. The charges were laughable: theft, emotional elder abuse, financial abandonment. It was a tantrum dressed up in legalese. Mira read over my shoulder, muttering, "Unbelievable. They're trying to destroy you because you walked away." For a brief moment, that old familiar guilt flared. The same voice that had haunted me since childhood whispered, "Maybe you're making too much of this. Maybe you should have just stayed quiet." But that voice had lost its power. Instead of spiraling, I inhaled slowly. "Not this time," I said aloud. "I'm done apologizing for saving myself." By noon, I was on the phone with a legal aid office. I explained everything methodically, forwarded them the proof I had already compiled, every payment, every receipt, every documented act of support. They listened, asked careful questions, then assured me they would help draft a countersuit if needed. "You have a strong case," the paralegal said, "and honestly, it sounds like you should be the one suing for exploitation." I didn't want revenge. I wanted my life back. That afternoon, I took their advice and filed my own formal complaints, outlining years of financial manipulation under emotional coercion. The backlash was swift. Vanessa found my work email again, her voice trembling with manufactured grief in a voice message she attached. "Eliza, please, you're tearing this family apart. We only wanted what was best for you. You're overreacting. You know your father's not well." I didn't respond. An hour later, Tyler forwarded me Richard's latest words, period. "You think you won? Family always gets the last word." I stared at it for a long time. Then I opened the small drawer beside my bed. Tucked in the corner was the tiny plastic cake topper I'd bought myself on my last birthday, the birthday they had turned into an eviction party. I turned it over in my hand, feeling the absurdity of how much hope had once been packed into such a small object. "Family isn't who you're born to," I whispered. "It's who treats you like you matter." 2 days later, I found myself standing outside the police station, legal papers in my hand, flanked by a volunteer advocate from the aid office. Inside, Richard sat rigidly at a battered wooden table, Vanessa beside him. They looked smaller than I remembered, angrier, weaker. An officer calmly explained that if they pursued the false charges, they could be countersued for defamation and financial abuse, charges that could stick with the evidence I held. Richard's face turned red. He shoved his chair back, rattling it against the floor. "This is a witch hunt," he snapped. "She's manipulating everyone." No one responded. Vanessa crumbled into her seat, sobbing loudly. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. As they stormed out, the officer turned to me and said quietly, "You did the right thing. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Outside, the sun was bright. I stood there for a moment, letting the light soak into my skin. With every step away from that building, the weight I had carried for decades lifted a little more. No more explaining, no more guilt, no more apologies. I spent the next few days moving into a small rental unit downtown. Nothing fancy, but it was mine if I wanted it. And for once I did. The apartment manager had been impressed by my credit score and rental history, approving my application almost immediately despite my sudden need for housing. I bought second-hand furniture piece by piece. I painted the walls pale blue, the color of open skies and deep breaths. At night, I would sit by the single living room window, watching the town lights blink on and off like distant stars, and I realized the silence no longer felt empty. It felt earned. One Saturday, while unpacking a final box, I found the tiny plastic cake topper, the one from the birthday that had ended everything. I held it in my palm for a long while. It didn't hurt to look at it anymore. It didn't feel like a reminder of what I lost. It felt like proof of what I survived. I placed it on a shelf above my desk, a small, private trophy, not to honor the people who hurt me, but to honor the girl who didn't let it destroy her. Sometime later, a card slipped under my door. No return address. Inside, a short note in careful handwriting. You were never the problem. Some people just fear the ones they can't control. I never found out who sent it. I didn't need to, because I already knew the truth, the final truth. Family isn't something you earn by sacrifice. It's something you're given freely or not at all. And in their absence, I was building something they could never take from me. Peace, self-respect, a life stitched together not from obligation but from choice. As I sat by my window that night, city lights glowing softly below, I smiled to myself and whispered the words I had waited my whole life to believe. I am enough. Sometimes walking away from the people who raised you is the only way to become the person you were meant to be. Blood may tie us together, but respect, trust, and kindness are what make a true family. My palms left sweaty prints on the acceptance letter as I stared at my parents across the kitchen table. Their faces had transformed from casual disinterest to something harder, something I'd seen before, but never this nakedly. "Diana," Mom said, not quite meeting my eyes, "we haven't planned to help with your college education at all." The partial scholarship certificate in my hand, the one I'd stayed up countless nights earning, the one that would cover half my tuition, suddenly felt worthless. The kitchen walls seemed to close in as Dad's next words registered. "In fact, it's time for you to move out. We've decided to give your room to your nephew." I couldn't breathe. 7 years of watching my sister Olivia receive everything while I received nothing had prepared me for disappointment, but not this. Not homelessness at 18, not total abandonment while they continued supporting my dropout sister and her child. But where am I supposed to go? My voice emerged as a whisper, foreign to my own ears. "You're an adult now," Mom replied, her voice turning cold as she gestured toward the door. "It's time you took care of yourself. The room situation is non-negotiable." My name is Fiona. I'm 25 and a corporate department head. This is the story of how I rebuilt my life after my family discarded me, and how justice finally found them in a courtroom. I'd always known I was second choice in my family. Born 5 years after my sister Olivia, I grew up watching the stark contrast in how we were treated. When I needed new shoes because mine had holes, Mom would dismiss me with, "We just bought you shoes last year." But Olivia could casually mention liking something, and it would appear in her room the next day. The pattern was crystal clear during one particular morning when I was 12. Olivia was sprawled on the couch, texting on her brand new Just Because phone from our parents. "I don't want to go to college," she announced during breakfast. "It's pointless and boring. I'd rather just stay home." Mom nearly dropped her coffee cup. "But honey, what about your future?" "Well," Dad started cautiously, "we were planning to pay for any college you choose, even if it's in another state." Olivia's entire demeanor transformed instantly. "Wait, any college? Even one far away from here?" "Of course, sweetheart," Mom jumped in. "We want what's best for you." "In that case," Olivia's eyes lit up, "I want to go to Pacific State." It's perfect, and it's 3 states away. I sat there pushing cereal around my bowl, already knowing that when my time came, the conversation would be very different. But I had my own plans. While Olivia coasted through high school with mediocre grades and an active social life, I buried myself in studies. It wasn't just about proving something. It was about survival. I watched her leave for college with fully paid tuition and a new wardrobe while I saved every dollar from babysitting and tutoring. Then came the call that changed everything. Olivia, 3 months into her 3rd year, was pregnant and the father wasn't in the picture, a phrase I'd hear repeated countless times. My parents immediately told her to come home, promising to take care of everything. A few months later, our house filled with the sounds of a newborn boy. Just like that, my parents had a grandson to dote on. Olivia settled into staying home all day with the baby, showing zero interest in finding work or finishing her degree. "I'm a full-time mom now," she'd say proudly whenever anyone mentioned working. "That's the most important job in the world." Meanwhile, I'd been studying harder than ever. My efforts paid off with acceptance to the local community college and that partial scholarship, the one now seeming to disintegrate in my hands as my parents explained they had no intention of helping me. That night, after being told to leave my home, I walked aimlessly through the neighborhood, my mind racing with panic. Then, like a light cutting through fog, I remembered Julia. We'd been friends since middle school. My hands shook as I called her. Julia lived in a beautiful apartment downtown, a graduation gift from her wealthy parents. When I arrived, she took one look at my tear-stained face and pulled me into a tight hug. "You're staying with me," she declared, leading me inside, "for as long as you need. No arguments." The next morning, Julia called her parents and asked them to come over. I tried to protest, but she wouldn't hear it. "They'll want to help, Fiona. Just let them." Mr. and Mrs. Brooks arrived within the hour. They listened intently as I reluctantly shared my story, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is unacceptable," Mr. Brooks said when I finished, his face red with anger. "No parent should treat their child this way. Julia, your mother and I will pay for Fiona's education." I started to shake my head. "Please, I couldn't." "You don't need to pay it back," Mr. Brooks added. "Consider it an investment in a bright young woman's future." "I appreciate it more than I can say," I insisted, "but I need to pay it back. Please. It would mean everything to have your help, but I want to earn it." They exchanged glances, and Mr. Brooks nodded with what looked like respect. I wrote out a formal receipt right then and there, my hand trembling slightly as I signed it. The next few days passed in a blur of adjustment. One evening, I saw a recruitment ad in the cafe near campus. I told Julia about it, and she unexpectedly replied that we should apply together. I was surprised. Julia had never worked before. She'd never needed to. We both got hired. Working together turned out to be more fun than either of us expected. We'd come home exhausted but laughing, smelling like coffee and sharing stories about difficult customers. During one Sunday dinner at her parents' house, Mrs. Brooks pulled me aside. "I need to thank you, Fiona," she said softly. "Julia's different now, more responsible, more independent. Before you moved in, she never thought about working or managing her own money. Now she hasn't asked us for extra cash in months. She's growing up, and I think a lot of that is because of your influence." "That's not because of me," I protested. "Julia's always been amazing." Mr. Brooks joined us, smiling. "True, but you've shown her a different way of looking at things. You know what she told me yesterday? She said she's proud of earning her own spending money. Our Julia, proud of working at a cafe. It was a damn nice confession." Community college might not have had the prestige of State University where Olivia had dropped out, but I was determined to make the most of it. I threw myself into every opportunity: academic competitions, student leadership programs, extra credit projects, anything that could help me stand out. The state business competition had been a turning point. I'd stayed up for 3 nights straight preparing my presentation on sustainable business practices. When they announced my name as the state winner, I couldn't believe it. Dean Reynolds called me to his office a week later. "Congratulations on your victory. The college has decided to offer you a full scholarship for the remainder of your studies." That evening, I called Julia with the news. She screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "We have to celebrate," she insisted. "Mom, Dad, Fiona got a full scholarship." The Brooks insisted on hosting a dinner in my honor. Their house had become more of a home to me than my parents' house ever was. Every Christmas, every holiday, they made sure I knew I had a place at their table. To Fiona, Mr. Brooks raised his glass at dinner, "We always knew you could do it." Even with the full scholarship, I kept my cafe job. Julia had moved on to other things, but I enjoyed the work and the extra income. Every dollar I saved felt like another brick in the foundation of my future. Graduation day came faster than I expected. As I stood in my cap and gown, I searched the crowd and found the Brooks beaming at me. My own parents and sister weren't there, and honestly, I preferred it that way. I hadn't spoken to them since the day they kicked me out, and I had no desire to change that. "Fiona," Mr. Brooks caught up with me after the ceremony, "I've mentioned you to some colleagues at Jensen Corporation. They're very interested in meeting you." Thanks to his recommendation, I landed a position in their project management team. The salary was enough for me to rent my own apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Every month I set aside money to repay the Brooks, despite their continued protests. I threw myself into work with the same dedication I'd shown in college. There was a particularly challenging project that nobody wanted to touch, a complete overhaul of our client management system. I volunteered. For 6 months, I lived and breathed that project. Late nights, endless meetings, countless revisions. But in the end, we didn't just succeed. We exceeded every target. The new system increased client retention by 40% and brought in millions in additional revenue. 2 years after starting at Jensen Corp, I handed Mr. Brooks a check for the full amount of my tuition, including interest. "You didn't have to do this," he said softly. "Yes, I did," I replied. "You believed in me when no one else would, but I needed to do this on my own." A week later, I was called into the CEO's office. I thought it was about the client management project, and in a way it was. "Fiona," she said, "we're creating a new department to handle strategic client relationships based on the success of your system overhaul. We want you to head it." At 25, I became the youngest department head in the company's history. The salary increase was substantial, more money than I'd ever dreamed of making at this age. I decided to celebrate my promotion with a small party at my apartment. Nothing too fancy, just close friends and a few cousins I'd stayed in touch with over the years. Julia helped me arrange everything, just like she always did for special occasions. "The food's amazing," my cousin Rachel said, helping herself to another appetizer. "You've really made it, Fiona. This apartment is gorgeous." The evening was going perfectly. Mr. and Mrs. Brooks were chatting with my work colleagues, wine was flowing, and laughter filled every corner of my home. I was in the middle of telling a funny story about my first day as department head when the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," I said, assuming it was the late delivery I'd been expecting. The moment I opened the door, my blood ran cold. There stood my parents and Olivia, with her 7-year-old son hiding behind her legs. 7 years. 7 years since I'd last seen them, and here they were on my doorstep. "Well," Mom pushed past me into the apartment, Dad and Olivia following close behind. "Aren't you going to welcome your family?" I stood frozen, my hand still on the door handle. How had they found me? Then I caught Rachel's guilty expression across the room, and I knew one of my cousins must have told them about the party. What kind of daughter throws a party and doesn't invite her own parents? Mom's voice carried across the now silent room. We had to hear about it from others. Finding my voice, I straightened my spine. "There's no reason why I would invite you. You made it clear years ago that we weren't family anymore." "Don't be ridiculous." Mom waved her hand dismissively. "We're your closest relatives. Of course we should be here." Before I could respond, they were pushing their way toward the dining area. Mom spotted Mr. Brooks sitting at the table and marched right up to him. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I need that seat. I'm Fiona's mother, her beloved mother." The room fell silent. Mr. Brooks looked at me, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. Other guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats as my family squeezed themselves into spaces that didn't exist. Then Mom began her performance. She stood up, wine glass in hand, though no one had offered her any. "Everyone here is celebrating my daughter's success," she announced grandly. "Well, as her mother, I deserve congratulations too. Look at her, a department head at just 25. She gestured around my apartment with sweeping arms. This luxurious apartment, that expensive car in the parking lot, the huge salary increase she just got. I watched in horror as she continued, her voice growing louder with each statement. How did she even know these details about my life? And yet, her voice suddenly turned bitter, with all this success, she doesn't help her own parents, not a penny. Before I could respond, Olivia jumped in, pulling her son closer to her side for dramatic effect. "You should see how we live, everyone," she said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "My poor boy, I can barely afford his school supplies. Meanwhile, my sister lives like a queen, has everything handed to her on a silver platter. She's forgotten where she came from, forgotten her own family." I felt something snap inside me. 7 years of built-up anger and hurt came rushing to the surface. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Enough!" My voice cut through the room like a knife. "You want to talk about family? Let's talk about family. Why don't you tell everyone the real reason I haven't spoken to you in 7 years? Mom's face paled slightly, but she kept her chin high. Dad suddenly became very interested in his shoes. "Tell them how you kicked your 18-year-old daughter out of the house," I continued, my voice steady despite my shaking hands. "Tell them how I came to you with a partial scholarship, asking for help with the other half of my tuition, the same tuition you fully paid for Olivia, and you refused." "Fiona," Dad started, but I wasn't finished. "Tell them how you gave away my room before I even had a chance to find somewhere else to live. Tell them how you said you'd done enough by raising me until I was 18. Tell everyone here how you left your younger daughter homeless because you decided your older daughter's lifestyle choices were more important." The room was dead silent. Even Olivia's son had stopped fidgeting, sensing the tension in the air. "After treatment like that," I said, looking directly at my mother, "what child would want to maintain a relationship with their parents?" Olivia jumped up, her face red. "Oh, poor Fiona, always the victim. Meanwhile, I'm raising a child alone." "You've been raising a child alone in our parents' house for 7 years. I cut her off. "Your son is 7 now, old enough for school. There's nothing stopping you from getting a job and helping our parents yourself." "You don't understand what it's like to be a mother," Olivia spat back. "You're just a careerist who only cares about herself. You don't know what it means to take care of a child 24/7. "Get out." My voice was quiet but firm. "All of you. Get out of my apartment right now." That's when Mom's expression changed to something calculated and cold. She smiled a smile that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, we'll leave," she said slowly, "but don't think you're getting rid of us that easily. We're going to sue you." "What?" I felt like I'd been slapped. "Your father and I are sick," she continued, her voice dripping with false fragility. "We're low income, struggling to make ends meet. The court will side with us. They'll force you to pay for our maintenance. After all, what kind of child abandons their elderly, ill parents when they're making so much money?" The room started spinning. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Julia, steady as always. Through the haze, I saw Mr. Brooks already pulling out his phone. "Fiona," he said quietly, "I know an excellent lawyer who specializes in family disputes. Let me make a call right now." The weeks leading up to the trial were a nightmare of harassment. My parents called repeatedly, trying different tactics each time. "Fiona, let's handle this like a family," Mom would say, her voice sickly sweet. "Just agree to $2,000 a month, and we can avoid all this unpleasantness." Each time, I hung up without a word. Then my cousin Rachel called, sounding worried. "Fiona, you need to know what's happening," she said. "Your parents are going around to all the relatives telling this sob story about how they're destitute and their ungrateful daughter abandoned them. They even convinced Aunt Martha to give them a huge sum for their lawyer. They're playing the vulnerable elderly parents card to everyone who will listen." Despite their attempts at pressure, the lawsuit moved forward. The first court session was set for a Tuesday morning. I sat beside my lawyer, Mr. Patterson, watching my parents put on their performance. Your Honor, their lawyer began, we have two elderly parents here, struggling with health issues and limited income. Their daughter, he gestured toward me, has achieved significant financial success. We're requesting monthly support of $4,000. I felt my stomach drop. $4,000 a month would ruin me financially, despite my recent promotion. Mr. Patterson squeezed my arm reassuringly. If I may, Your Honor, he stood up, straightening his tie, I'd like to point out something that the plaintiffs seem to have conveniently forgotten. They have two children, not one. The courtroom went quiet. My parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. If they're claiming they raised both daughters equally, Mr. Patterson continued, then surely both daughters bear equal responsibility for their parents' care. Therefore, on behalf of my client, I move to have any awarded support split equally between both sisters. That would be $2,000 each. The reaction was immediate. Olivia shot up from her seat like she'd been electrocuted. No, she shrieked. You can't make me pay anything. I'm a single mother. I can't work. Order in the court, the judge warned, but Olivia was beyond control. This is ridiculous, she continued ranting. I'll tell you the truth. They're lying. Mom and Dad have plenty of savings. There's nothing wrong with their health either. My parents' faces had turned ghostly white. They just wanted easy money when they found out Fiona was making good money now, Olivia spat out. They have enough to live on, more than enough. They just thought they could guilt her into supporting all of us. The judge's expression had transformed from stern to incredulous as he listened to Olivia's outburst. He removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. In all my years on the bench, he said slowly, I have never seen such a blatant attempt to manipulate the court or such arrogant behavior from parents toward their child. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Case dismissed. The gavel came down with a final, satisfying crack. The evening after the trial, I sat in my apartment, still processing everything that had happened. Julia brought over a bottle of wine and watched as I typed out a long social media post. The post was simple and factual, just a straightforward account of what had happened in court, including Olivia's outburst and the revelation about my parents' true financial situation. Within hours, my phone was buzzing constantly with messages from relatives and friends. Fiona, I had no idea, my cousin Rachel wrote. We all believed their story about being destitute. I'm so sorry. Aunt Martha was particularly furious. She'd shown up at my parents' house the very next day, demanding the return of the money she'd given them for their lawyer. You lied to me, I heard she'd shouted, loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. You said you were struggling to afford food, and all this time you had savings. I want every penny back or I'll file fraud charges. My parents had no choice but to repay her. One by one, relatives began distancing themselves from my parents. Family gatherings became awkward affairs, with most people making excuses not to attend if my parents were going to be there. About a month after the trial, Rachel called with more news. You won't believe what happened, she said. Olivia and your parents had a huge fight. Apparently, they blamed her for ruining their case with her outburst in court. She packed up her son's things and moved out. She's staying with some friend from high school. And get this, she actually got a job at the supermarket. First real job of her life. I couldn't help but laugh. How's she handling that? Oh, she's all over social media complaining about it. You don't know how hard it is to work 8 hours a day. My feet hurt. The customers are so rude. Someone should tell her that's just called being an adult. Life settled into a new normal after that. I focused on my career, my real friends, and the relatives who had shown their true colors. The good ones. The Brooks remained my chosen family, with Julia's mom still insisting I come over every Sunday for dinner. Sometimes I hear updates about my parents and Olivia through the family grapevine. Mom and Dad largely keep to themselves now. Their social circle dramatically shrunk after their scheme was exposed. Olivia's still at the supermarket, still complaining, but at least she's supporting herself and her son for the first time in her life. As for me, I'm doing better than ever. My department is thriving. I've got a solid group of friends and enough supportive family members to make holidays warm and wonderful. Looking back on everything that's happened, I realize that losing my biological family forced me to create something better. A chosen family built on love, respect, and genuine support. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way.